Showtime. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, LinkedIn Live. This is saying that we're live, but I've been noticing there's a little bit of a delay connecting into LinkedIn, but it's saying we're live. So let's assume we're live. Good morning, Jason. Jason Roberts of Kaleida. Good morning.
Cheryl, good morning. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Jason, as I said, you are I think you're only the first person to come on this twice.
There
So
you
you
go.
must be doing something right.
I've got to try and make an impact now, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
now.
No pressure, no pressure. Good morning, Jason. Good morning, Jason. Good morning. If you're watching us live, good morning. Please do say good morning in the chat. Let us know where you are. Let us know what the weather's like. It's grey where I am, but it's warm, right? It's grey, but it's warm. I've taken the dog out for a walk and it's warm. How are things where you are, Jason?
Yeah,
How's
grey
the
as
weather
well.
in the
But
south?
yeah, it's about 12 degrees at the moment, which is weird
Yeah.
considering there's an Arctic blast across in the US. So yeah, grey and mild. There you go.
Yes, grey and mild. So yeah, good morning everybody that might be joining us. Good morning if you are watching on the replay. Thank you for taking some time out this morning as well. Jason, I almost feel like before we start, you need to tell us about that beautiful artwork that's behind you.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So that's my daughter. She's 20 now, but we went to Portugal for our first holiday, and that's one of the pictures that she really loved of us together. And so she done a time-lapse video painting the same picture, but in the style of Picasso, as a gift to me.
Amazing.
Yeah, so a lovely bit of art from her.
Oh, that's
I enjoy.
fabulous. That is absolutely fabulous. So we've got our first good morning. Morning to you both. As we know, with the technical stuff, it doesn't always come through on LinkedIn who the person is. I'll try and pull that up on my phone. But good morning. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, and just talking about Jason's artwork. For those that don't know Jason, obviously he's got it in his name there. Jason Roberts off of Kaleida. So Kaleida is the B2B marketplace, B2B platform. I feel I've learned a bit about Kaleida, not just this morning off camera, but I was talking to a mutual contact that we've both got, Maxine Crow.
Yes.
And she was telling me even more about Kaleida, probably stuff that I didn't know, because obviously she's also got procurement background. So Jason is the CEO and founder of Kaleida. It's Wayne. Good morning, Wayne. I can see now who's posted that. Good morning. So Jason, founder of Kaleida, background in financial services, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
Tell us about why you started Kaleida. What's the problem that you solve for people and organizations?
Yeah, well, good morning, everyone, as well. And Cheryl, thanks for the question as well and for inviting me back. Look, my background was financial services, as you said. I spent 24 years in bank, well, 11 years in banking and then about 13 years selling back to banks. And when I was in sales, I always just found it quite hard to find the person at the right time when they're buying. So you make, 12,000 calls a year, 50 calls a day, and you often miss that opportunity to sell to that buyer because they're just not in the market. Buyers tend to buy quite reactively, not proactively. And I wanted to stop missing the opportunities. So I said, actually, how about I create a system where the buyer can tell me that they're now live to go, they're ready to buy a product or service. But in addition to that, the key thing was also when you finally get into those rooms, when you finally get through to the buyer, you book a meeting and you walk into those rooms, there was often, and this is in particular with financial services, very little representation in those rooms. And so when you're a diverse individual, be it a woman selling construction services, for example, maybe you're disabled or LGBTQ+, when there's no representation, there can be unseen barriers through unconscious biases that impact your outcomes. And so I wanted to create a platform that not only allowed buyers to get access to suppliers when they needed them, but also to give suppliers access to as much opportunity as possible from buyers who actually want to work with diverse owned businesses.
Yeah, amazing. And I know it's interesting the way that you describe it there. For some reason, I don't know why I didn't realize that on your platform. So say for example, so I'm a small business owner, I deliver training, consultancy, etc. I can go onto your platform and there will be actual opportunities like tenders and RFPs and things like that I can respond to that, you know, potentially I can deliver to. That's right, isn't it? Because I think some people probably don't know what it will actually be, what the platform is. So actually they can, so for me as a small business, I can go on and see the activity, and as you say, see those organizations that are looking to procure those goods and products and services, correct?
Correct, yeah. So it's similar to a dating app, right? You put in your profile what you're looking for, and then when there's a match, you get alerted to that match.
Yeah.
So if you're selling HR consultancy services or perhaps flowers, when the buyer goes in and says we're actually going to tag this opportunity to flowers, it will alert you that the buyer's in the market right now. And so being able to, I guess, support your pipeline, building of the pipeline through live activity, live opportunities, that's its real purpose. So we've got both public and some private sector companies putting opportunities into the platform. And last year, I think the total was about 850 billion pound of opportunity. Now, mostly public sector, clearly. But for small businesses who are looking for a lead or looking for somewhere to go, they can go to the public sector and try to sell their services there. Critical to that is the Procurement Act 2023, which went live last month. I think, this month, sorry. These public sector organizations want to increase their spend with SMEs, which will obviously include diverse suppliers as well. Right. And so because of that, the approach to selling, there'll be reduced barriers around RFPs, less questions to answer. Those are the things that will really make it easier for smaller businesses to make revenue for their organizations.
Right. I never knew that. You see, for those that don't know, the way I first met Jason, I was moderating a panel at the I'm going to say the Purchase to Pay network. It was P2P, the P2P. And I must admit, so it was a panel about diversity within procurement, you know, within this industry. And when Jason started to speak, I mean, obviously I was just moderating the panel, but when Jason started to speak, I was like, this guy really knows his stuff. And plus also I learned something. And whenever I learn something, you know, I hear somebody speak and I learn something, and there's facts and there's knowledge, because I do think as an industry, if I sort of broaden it out a bit, diversity, equity, inclusion, we're sometimes lacking the science, right, the rigor around this industry. And so Jason, I've learned something already. We're only 7 minutes in. You taught me about the Procurement Act already. See, I knew there was value in you.
Bomb sound, right?
And the reason that I wanted you to explain as well about what Kaleida is, and I know we're going to talk about the evolution of it, is because I know that there are other people in this market space, and I won't necessarily name them, but I think they're not all the same. And I wanted people to know exactly what it is that Kaleida does. Because I must admit, when Maxine told me a few weeks ago, I was like, really? I don't know why I didn't realize the extent of what you do. So, you know, so that's been really interesting.
But one of the key things, though, is helping people to understand the difference between DE&I and Supplier Diversity, because there is there's an interesting misunderstanding, right? So for your audience, DE&I focuses really on the protected characteristics, right? There's 9 protected characteristics, and you're not allowed to discriminate against those characteristics. This is in legislation under the Equality 2010 Act. So that looks after people within a company, right? Are you providing opportunities to people for promotion, or are they being ignored? Is there some prejudice or discrimination because they are X diverse, etc.? But supplier diversity looks at equality from an ownership perspective. Who owns that business, and are they being marginalized as business owners, as business founders? As I used in the example earlier, if you're a woman-owned construction firm, it's not impossible you might experience some discrimination or unconscious bias, perhaps, when going to bid for work to build a roof, for example, because women don't do construction, you know, would be something like the stereotypical mindsets. And so, understanding that supply diversity is about giving access to opportunities for businesses owned by diverse communities. And there are 6: ethnic minorities, women-owned, neurodivergent, disabled, LGBTQ+, and veterans. Those are the 6 identities. It's just slightly different to DE&I, which focuses on creating opportunities for people in employment.
Yes, yeah, and that was the first thing I remember learning on that panel was when you talked about that difference in the fact that there are 6, not 9, and the 6 as well. Just remind me, are those 6 global as well? Because obviously we know that the 9 are predominantly sort of like UK. There is a lot of crossover with European, slightly different in the States, different by state as well in terms of the protected. The 6 though for the supplies, is that global? Is that like a global standard?
It is global. In the US, well, prior to the executive order, whatever number it was, that suddenly disbanded and sunset supply diversity in the US, there was 7 because there was one for disabled veterans as well.
Okay.
So so there's those who were disabled, then you got disabled veterans, and then there are veterans. So those would be 3, and so but there are 7 in total.
Yeah,
were 7, that we say in the US, which is a great shame.
Yeah. Let's just start with the business case for supply diversity, and then we'll go on to, and that will probably lead into this question around, and you have touched on it already, and I know it's something you talk about a lot, equality of opportunity versus outcome. So let's just talk about the business case first of all. So from an organizational perspective, so that the ones that are doing the procuring, right, the buyers, what's the business case for them in terms of supply diversity? Why should they be thinking about this?
Well, it's really around trying to discover innovations, right? A lot of the times when you are of a diverse background, you tend to approach solutions very differently to a large corporate organization, right? A tier 1 supplier will not be as nimble as perhaps a small business. They are going to be wrapped around in bureaucracy and maybe slow to get things done. Whereas diverse suppliers really understand certain aspects of life differently and can move quickly. And a good example, actually, Kaleida is a very good example of that. You know, I am a diverse Black man myself, and the way I understood the challenge that businesses had, I was able to put that into effect. So there is certainly one to focus on trying to discover innovations. But then what's interesting as well is from the buyer's perspective, buyers also want to make sure that that suppliers are focused on sustainability and social value. And so from a supplier perspective, and I mean like a tier 1 supplier, so a big corporate organization, if they don't do supply diversity, they will be at risk of losing large government contracts or large contracts, because they're going to be in procurement. When you complete an RFP, there's a weight per category. So between 10 and 30% at the moment is now weighted in government tenders around diversity. Do you have a sustainability program? And so imagine you're a large corporate organization who provides services to the public sector, for example. If you don't do supply diversity or have a program for it, you may lose that million, 10 million, 50 million, 100 million pound deal because you haven't done the right thing for society, which is that. So
it's really interesting. And you know, as you were talking there, a couple of things were sort of like flying in. I mean, because one of the protected characteristics you talked about was neurodivergence. And yesterday I watched the latest Diary of a CEO episode, which is Stephen Bartlett with Mr. Beast, who I'd never watched before, had heard of. I remember him popping onto Clubhouse. I've been talking about Clubhouse a lot lately. But Mr. Beast, you know who Mr. Beast is, right?
Yeah, he does. Is it games
the biggest,
and money?
He's now got Beast Games on Amazon. Yeah, the biggest YouTuber on the planet. 300 and I think it's something like 328 million subscribers. It's ridiculous.
That's phenomenal.
But what's interesting, so he's now developing products. So he's created a chocolate bar called Feastables, which is ethically sourced. But he has ADHD. I mean, clearly has ADHD, very obsessive about products and product detail. And when he was talking through his approach to the manufacture and the sourcing with Stephen Bartlett, I mean, Stephen Bartlett was literally blown away because you could see the way his brain works. And Stephen was like, I've never spoken to anybody that is this obsessive about product, pays that much attention to detail, etc. And so when you were talking there about the business case in terms of innovation, for example, you know, particularly with somebody that just sees the world very differently, you know, I totally get it in terms of organizations working with individuals like that own business and develop products, the sky's the limit almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and what's interesting actually is a lot of times, a lot of people in a company environment, they are a shadow of their real selves, right?
Yeah,
But when they go into running their own businesses, that's when they can really fly and spread their wings. And that's when it leads to great discovery by a buyer who says, in your own environment, you've been able to create something absolutely incredible and make a real impact. So there's business cases on both sides. Really, from the buyer's perspective, it's to make that discovery around innovation. Ethically, they want to do the right thing to kind of pass some wealth down the pipeline as well. From the supplier's perspective, it really is around being able to compete because they are also doing sustainable and social value type projects.
Amazing. And in terms of, I tell you that where our paths sort of cross in terms of our niches. Obviously, I focus on employee resource groups, so ERGs, and obviously you kind of look at this in terms of supplier diversity programs. But the first ERG was at Xerox, right? I don't know whether you knew that. So Xerox had the first employee resource group, but they were also big in this space, weren't they? Supplier diversity, because actually around the time that they developed that first employee resource group, they also developed almost like a kind. It was out of the civil rights, but they developed a black-owned manufacturing arm that could supply Xerox. I don't know whether you knew that, but so again, it kind of all links into the business case, isn't it? Talk to me about fairness of equality of opportunity versus outcome, and your thoughts on, because I know you got some views on that. If anybody wants some interesting posts and interesting and thought-provoking LinkedIn content, you need to be following Jason's polls and voting in them.
Well, look, so here's a funny thing, right? I think, so here's my principle is that everyone deserves access to the thing, to the opportunity, wherever it might be, but not everyone deserves the outcome, right?
So you got to earn the outcome is what you believe, I guess, right?
So me being a black man doesn't give me the right to be given something, right? Can I get access to compete for it? Absolutely. And that's really what Supplier Diversity was about. It's about giving the access to the opportunities, and then you compete. Now, what you hope for is, actually, I think the word's going to be changing over time. We're going to be moving from supplier diversity to supplier equity as such instead, because it's really going to be around how do you give someone a chance who probably doesn't experience those opportunities, who's, because of their identity, they get marginalized, they get denied access to those rooms. And so in order to create, Cheryl, here's the thing. What's happened, in my opinion, is that we've lost allies because we've made other people the pariah when they're not. We've made them, they feel guilty, like they're being called that they're racist or they're sexist or they're homophobic, when they simply might not understand something. And then what happens is, because people are trying to deliver metrics and award jobs or promotions or opportunities just to tick a box, it creates friction in society. And we don't want that. What we actually want is, let's compete on an even scale. Let's all have access to that opportunity and let the best person win the outcome. Unfortunately, when that has happened in the past, nepotism creeps in, unconscious bias creeps in, and then we go back to where we were in the past. I like the idea of give me the same chance to win. Give me that opportunity. But I don't want to be a token, because that kind of, in my view, that creates friction in society in a way.
Interesting. And I like that word that you use, friction. But interestingly, because the way that you explained it there is where I think the friction is good. Let me put this argument to you, where I think the friction is good is, as you say, if there is nothing around the process to make sure that the process is fair, that's when nepotism creeps in, bias can creeps in, people get their mates in, people are giving backhanders, blah blah blah, and that will, on the surface, that will appear to be a frictionless system, and it is, but actually it's unfair. Do you know what I mean? And so sometimes the friction that I guess, when you think about the E of like equity and or equality, sometimes the friction that is trying to create isn't necessarily to, to vilify certain groups and to kind of, make make things unfair. The friction is there to make sure it is fair, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? It's
but last night I was making some notes, and I really want to say this. I want to read this. It's the one line about this particular part of the conversation.
Yeah.
When one is accustomed, and hear this, when you're accustomed to privilege, equality can feel like oppression.
Yeah.
When you think about it, right? And so all one is asking for, whatever your diverse identity is to level that playing field, create the same opportunity to compete, and it's not at the detriment of someone else who has no God-given right to that outcome, right?
Yes.
So, as Pauline is saying, the opportunity to compete is what everyone's asking for. Give me a chance to throw my hat in the ring. And this is why I said in a post maybe a month ago, if you're gonna miss the bus, miss it running. Like, go for it. Get the chance to run for it,
Yeah, so absolutely. Morning, Pauline. Pauline, I've got to get you on this conversation one morning. Honestly, you're next on my list, so I'll be in your DMs afterwards. But yeah, opportunity to compete, and then and one way I've heard it described is, and then you want what I like to call procedural fairness. So you want everybody to have the opportunity to compete, the access to the opportunity. And then they want to know that when they then go through the process, it's going to be fair for everyone. They're going to be measured on the same, on the same sort of standard, basically, as everybody else. Yeah.
So yes, but there is also an outcome that has to be focused on. The company, in this case, from Supplier Diversity, making a buying decision. They are making a strategic buying decision that requires, good products, customer service, etc. Those things can't be compromised on. The outcome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So then what you want is perhaps the ability for someone to be able to help us get to that journey, to that stage. And that's the equity that we're really talking about. So we've got access to the opportunity. That's a chance.
Yeah.
We're probably not going to win this one, but can we get some support thereafter? And it's very complex because no one wants to be left alone to compete in a world that they have not got the tools to have a fair fight. But yeah, supply diversity, the most important thing is access to opportunity, most critical measure of success.
I get it. Absolutely. Perfect. So let's talk about the evolution of, and I know before we sort of jumped on, you talked about where you potentially, areas that as Kaleida, you're going to potentially move into to better support organizations, buyers, and also businesses. So just let's talk about, where do you see supply diversity going, and what are you doing as an organization to best sort of position yourselves to support buyers and small businesses?
Well, it's interesting because, supply diversity came back in the US during the civil rights movement, doing affirmative action, and now that's all gone. 60 years of hard work, of marches, of protests, of people being killed, and all that loss is now almost for nothing from a procedural standpoint in the US. The future of supply diversity, therefore, has to evolve to still allow businesses run by people who experience marginalization. Racism hasn't gone away. Sexism hasn't disappeared overnight. So we still need to be able to give those individuals, those business owners, a chance still to compete. So how do you do that? For me, it's got to be through, I'll call it really more tech-enabled evolution. Technology has to help to create the processes that open up the opportunities and then allow you to compete from a human perspective, but that's got to be supported and underpinned by really good, strong change management programs, right? You need to be able to help people understand why supply diversity is important,
right?
What the outcomes are for those who are successful, how to conquer resistance to change within a corporate organization, and how do you drive adoption. You get those things right, the supply diversity piece becomes a normal BAU almost.
Yeah. Do you know what? I love that. I mean, I'd be really interested in Pauline's thoughts on this as well. But I know that quite a few people, like in the sort of diversity, equity, inclusion space, even around, sort of like jobs and other things. I think one of the things that we have missed the focus on within this whole area is that embedding of the change management into BAU, such that the access of opportunity, etc., and that fairness in the procedures and support to individuals where they need it, to make sure that that is embedded and happens anyway. I think, and I was saying this to somebody on a conversation, this rolling back of DEI, right? If more of this stuff had been embedded into policy and process, it couldn't have been rolled back so easily. You couldn't have just, literally signed an order and the next day it's all gone away. You couldn't have done that. And so actually, I think as practitioners, and I certainly say that about myself, and I think in the work that you're doing as well, what you're talking about actually is starting to embed what really is good practice into BAU, which is really what we should have been doing anyway, right? It shouldn't have just been a bolt-on initiative. It should have just been embedded in the way business is done.
Yeah, and what underpins it all is unconscious bias, right?
Yeah.
So if you can tackle and educate people around the biases that they may have, be it unconscious biases that they may have, then you give them the tools to second guess, to question themselves. So, have I discounted this supplier because it's run by X person? And then you kind of sanity check it with a colleague and say, actually, can you help me out? I don't know if I've got a bias here. I want to make sure I'm not being biased. It's very simple because, frankly, we all have biases in ourselves. Humans, we're built to be biased and to protect ourselves from things that look foreign. And so from that perspective, it's normal to have a bias. It becomes detrimental when the outcomes of others are affected. And so you just want to be able to kind of just check and challenge yourself in those decisions. Change management really, when done properly, support the legacy of what supplier diversity is meant to achieve.
Absolutely. And just that little example that you gave there, because I always talk about, it's the tools and the systems and the processes to eke the bias out, if that makes sense, because we know that the training and stuff is great, but we know that doesn't always stick. And as you say, we're human anyway. So our natural instincts are going to override that anyway. So it's having systems like that, like things like peer reviews, like really rigorous scoring that is like evidence-based and as objective as possible. It's those things actually that's how you kind of almost like systemize, trying to minimize that bias. And I think those are the things where we, the collective, we as an industry, haven't done as well in terms of embedding those. And I don't think it's that easy to do either. And I think it does take system, it takes a bit of tech, it takes a change in business process as well, which isn't easy. Transformation and change management isn't always easy. But I think that's what we've been missing.
I mean, what you tend to find is people say, I just want the best person for the job. I just want the best company for the service. And that's all well and good intention. But understanding where one may have decided against someone because of the name on the resume, because of the company name or whatever it might be, these things actually have a real impact on people. So you kind of want to be able to educate against it.
Absolutely. I mean, the one of the things actually that I find most frustrating about the current debate around, we just want, I think I've heard it several times, we just want the best and the brightest, want the best person for the job. I mean, the one book that I always recommend to leadership teams that need to understand the impact of bias on decision making, forget diversity, equity and inclusion for a moment. Bias in terms of how it affects our everyday decisions is the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. It has nothing to do with the social good and doing the right thing. But that book just teaches us about bias and how basically bias affects everything that we do all day, all the time, and leads to poor decisions if we're not careful, because our brains are lazy, right? Our brains just want an easy time. And I think this is just like fundamental stuff. This is nothing to do with civil rights and social justice. It's just good business decision making. So that book, if anybody's looking for a tip, Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman, was a Nobel Prize winner for that book. An economist, it just talks about exactly what you're saying, Jason, in terms of, to get the best and the brightest, actually you need very rigorous processes to evaluate the thing. Otherwise your biases kick in and you're like, oh, but that person went to the same school as me, or I used to know somebody that looked a bit like that person and they were really good. So therefore, because we're all human, right? And we love making human connections and,
right. But
looking at that might harm us.
But this is why, supply diversity is going to evolve. It has to, because the measures of success weren't necessarily the ones that would actually drive change. It wasn't, if the measures of success for supply diversity programs was access, it means that buyers would be putting these opportunities in the public domain where everyone could see it and therefore give someone a chance, right? So, but instead the measure of success was, how much have we spent? Now you can spend $1 billion with one company and think you've made a change when you actually haven't. But if you spend $1 billion with 200 companies, that's real change, because you've really given, you've actually, advertised and marketed and made opportunities more accessible. This is why I go back to it. Being fully inclusive is really critical. So you're looking at all diverse groups, but also making opportunities as accessible as possible. After that, you can begin to look at, are we spending with mostly women in one category, or are we giving those LGBTQ plus an opportunity in other areas? You can look into the detail that way. But really, the first thing is, we've got £10 million to spend. Have we made that accessible to those who can compete and bid?
Just picking up on Pauline's comment here, part of the problem is too many people who are passionate but have not educated themselves. Lots of noise and a scattergun approach. If you're the average person not involved in this work, it is overwhelming. Let's simplify it going forward. Passionate people step aside. Love thinking fast and slow. Thinking fast and slow is my go-to. But I agree with you, Pauline, in terms of sometimes passion has got in the way of this work. Passion and this striving for social justice, which in and of itself isn't a bad thing. But I think, as you say, Pauline, when you combine that with the passion and maybe even like the lack of education in terms of how to go about this work and how to get it embedded, that's kind of dangerous. And I think you're right, Pauline, that's probably contributed to where we are currently. So, Jason, what can people see from Kaleida going forwards, and just maybe any final tips for organizations that are maybe looking at their supply diversity program and thinking, where should we take it? What should we be doing now as an organization?
So the first thing really is to ensure that you've got executive sponsorship, right? You need that top-down push. I mean, they say the fish rots from the head, but it also can thrive and be successful as well. You need the execs on board. One of the critical things we've built out now through our AI capability is what's called baselining. The challenge that people have in corporates is, well, why do we need to do a supply diversity? And they probably can't service us. That's what the kind of the fear or the mindset is. When you perform a baseline exercise, you look at your existing supply chain and you identify who is already a diverse supplier. Then you can tie back. Last year we made £15 million in profit. We've already got 6% of our supply chain are diverse. We're making money with the support of these diverse suppliers. So conducting a baseline exercise becomes critical, because it can evidence success already through your supply chain. And then from a technology standpoint, what we're doing is we move into a space where we want to help. We understand that diverse suppliers exist within the tail spend of a supply chain, right? They're not the big, they're not that 20% but get 80% of the spend. They are the 80% that gets 20% of spend. And we're building a tail spend service, which basically allows buyers to approve suppliers that then they can then guarantee spend with. So you get supply diversity, they get access to opportunities, they get guaranteed spend. That's how we're making people have an impact, all underpinned by the AI, which is driving and powering the baseline exercise of evidencing diversity within the supply chain.
Right. Now I understand why you had that poll about who controls the tail spend.
Yes, because it was a matter of, are we trying to convince or sell to or get on board the accounts payable team? Look, the accounts payable, those guys do a great job, but they process so many, in large businesses, thousands and thousands of invoices every year. Our tool will actually bring it down to maybe 12 to 15 invoices per year for the tail spend. So when you remove pain, when you solve another critical problem that can actually impact and release resources that can save money, that's when businesses say, right, what else can we now do to help others? You have to drive value for the business. And as a technology provider, we have to drive value for the corporates in order for them to be enabled to deliver value and opportunities to the suppliers.
Yeah.
It has to be, that's the way it works. That's the way the order.
Absolutely. Yeah. We need to talk more. You know, my background was finance transformation, right?
Was
So
it?
we need to talk some more, but I love it. The tailspin, that wasn't a term that I had come across. I must admit, when I saw it on your poll, I thought, I've never really come across that as a concept. But your question was interesting in terms of who is responsible for that tailspin. And as you say, that's potentially where the opportunity is, you know, for that innovation, for looking at things differently, but also for getting that, again, around that business case, for getting those gains just around the processing cost, right? Which is obviously a massive issue, and the onboarding.
The resistance that we felt when we worked with our clients is they just want it to be easy. Supply diversity has got to be easy. You know, procurement as a department, as a function, has taken on so much responsibilities, right? Sustainability, deliver prices and cost savings, all these really high, really strategic, important activities, and not really recognized for it. And then you've been asked to deliver social value as well. It becomes really difficult. So if the more we can make as a technology provider, and all technology organizations, by the way, this is a call to action for everyone. The easier we can make the operational efforts for procurement, the more impact they can have with a diverse supply chain. And so we've got to kind of pull together on that, which is why we're really driving that journey around diversity and tailspin, combining those two outcomes.
I love that. Brilliant. I absolutely love that. I totally agree with you. In my previous life in finance transformation, I used to talk about path of least resistance. I was like, you've got to make this change, the path of least resistance, because that's what people will take, right? When you're trying to deliver change on a big scale. Totally get it. Jason, it's been amazing. Final thoughts from you in terms of, you know, if there's anybody watching this in their organization. You talked about getting exec sponsors on board. Would that be your main sort of like takeaway? Is that the most important thing, having that leadership?
No, the leadership is critical, but I think there's really three components. It really is the exec sponsorship and change management. Those two things, they go hand in hand. And once you've got that foundation, anything else after is possible. The key thing, though, and what we have to understand is there's going to be resistance. Some people like the idea and they are advocates for it, but although they may be advocates, the systems and the policies internal may not support their dreams and desires. So by going through a rigorous change management process, that does take time. It's methodical. You can drive the change that a business wants to change or wants to make. And if you think about it, and I'll close on this. We know that supply diversity works, right? There's a 3 to 4% market share gain when representation is done well. But critical, when you think about a couple of years ago to the Virgin Atlantic advert, they done a really good advert where there was different representations done throughout. Now, I looked at the numbers. I don't want to make the numbers up, so don't quote me on this one. But they went from sort of like 3.6 billion in sales down to like something maybe like 0.7, sorry. I mean, that was during COVID. But when they climbed to 2.9, they then went back up to like almost like 3.8, 3.9, because the advert had done its job. It had made people feel recognized. So supply diversity is also good business. It turns revenue and it creates profit. And that really is what businesses want to see. Investors want to see their businesses make money. And so supply diversity really is an avenue and a vehicle to do that.
Yeah, amazing. Jason, thank you so much for it's been like another education.
Thank you so much for having me again. Great.
And thank you everyone that's been listening live. Pauline, thank you for joining us. Wayne, thank you for joining us, and others, because not all of the comments have pulled through, but thank you so much for joining us. And if you have watched this on the replay, thank you for taking 40 minutes out of your day to check this out. Obviously, if you want to find out more about the amazing services that Kaleida offer, please do get in touch with Jason. Jason, where's the best place to connect with you? Is it here on LinkedIn or
LinkedIn? I love LinkedIn. I'm a strong advocate for LinkedIn, so please reach out on LinkedIn. It'd be great.
Absolutely perfect. All right. Oh, there's one more. There's a couple of comments that have now literally just flung in. Let me just share them really quickly before we shoot. Challenging most corporates is that the tail spend isn't proactively managed and or is managed by experience. Maybe it's not managed by experienced buyers yet. On top of this, the general strategy is to consolidate the spend with these suppliers in this area into the larger supplier contracts. The procurement strategy needs to include supplier equity. That's a really interesting point. Go on, Wayne. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, very quickly. So so I can't say the name of the individual, but they're
it's Wayne. It's Wayne. Okay, that one,
Wayne.
Yeah.
So Wayne is spot on, and this is why we're doing what we're delivering in our invoice aggregation capabilities. Because once the supply, if you look at financial services as a sector, they are heavily regulated, right? So knowing your supply chain is critical to mitigating risk and therefore maybe getting fined. When you restrict or constrict your supply chain to approved suppliers, you're then able to know them better and work closely with them, and then utilize what we're doing with Tailspend to use our invoice aggregation capabilities, which basically reduces the workload. So Wayne's spot on there. Our approach to minimizing the supply chain is best. And Peter.
Definitely. And then Peter said, really think about your audience. Not everyone will get the social impact part. And Peter, you're absolutely right. Whenever it comes to the business case around diversity in particular, and that's why we sort of started this conversation with what is the business case. Business case have two elements, right? There's the moral case in terms of the right thing to do, which, you know, you talked about fairness in terms of equality of opportunity, but then there's the, you know, I'm an accountant by trade, right? So there's the commercial business case in terms of like, show me the money, right? What is the business case? Which is really important to understand, you know, and obviously you talked about innovation. And I think I would say to anybody maybe that's involved then in supply diversity programs internally, is making sure that you understand that business case for your organization. You know, where are those opportunities? Whether it be in terms of, you know, innovation around the supply, or as you were saying, Jason, savings actually around the processing, you know, the actual process, the accounts payable process, or the you know, the onboarding and procurement processes themselves. So amazing. Thank you for those two comments that just literally flew in as we were closing up. Thank you for everyone that's joined us. Jason, I'm sure we're going to talk some more anyway, because I'm fascinated by it. But thank you everyone for joining. Have an amazing weekend, everybody. Take care.
Goodbye.